So for today's workshop, we have Christoph Neander presenting Working with Tambours. Sliding tambour panels can be an attractive alternative to traditional doors and drawers for enclosing dedicated spaces in a cabinet. Christoph will explain the design requirements for the cabinet itself and cover the detailed procedures involved in making a tambour panel of your choice. Christoph was born in Frankfurt, Germany, moved to the U.S. in 1986 and settled in Santa Fe in 2000, where he was hired as an instructor in the Santa Fe Community College working program. He initially discovered woodworking while attending college in Germany when he had decided that he wanted to do something different from his academic pursuits. Christoph is a professional woodworker and has been trained in Germany in their guild system. He does design and construction of one-of-a-kind pieces of furniture as commissioned work for home or office, as well as original gallery pieces. He's had entries in galleries across the country and won awards for his woodworking. His work has also appeared in numerous publications such as Fine Woodworking and Workshop News. So please give Christoph a warm welcome.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me back. And I have actually been here several years ago doing pretty much the same presentation. For those of you who have heard it, consider it a little refresher course, and then for those of you who haven't, it's all news. So we're going to do a mix of things. I'm going to show you a lot of photos that, first a group of photos that will give you a sense of examples of work, how you can actually feature tambour panels in pieces of furniture. Then there's a whole series of photos that describe a step-by-step procedure on how you go about building a case and panel to do that. And I actually brought the very piece with me. Last time I did the presentation, it wasn't finished yet. Now it is. I don't want to interrupt the photos too much by pointing out the appropriate details on the cabinet, but maybe when I'm done with the photos, I'll put the cabinet up here and we can review some key elements that I talked about so you can see it live in person in front of you. Come up later on, take a close look at the cabinet itself. Yeah, so let's get the screen ready and turn down the lights. Feel free to ask any questions in mid-flow of pictures. We don't have to wait till everything's done. But I'll try to cover all the basics.
It's better if you leave the lights on.
Is it better to see? I mean, as long as you recognize the photo well. That's all I'm concerned about. So we are already in number one. So the most famous example of a tambour panel is the traditional roll-top desk. This is a piece from the early 20th century from a railroad station, the station master desk, somewhere back east in Pennsylvania. A friend of mine actually owns this piece, so he let me photograph it. And you see already the elements of all the different slats that follow a track. Okay. We are turned on. Am I going in the wrong direction? No.
I don't know. It just seems to be. Maybe I just have to move my.
I'm so sorry. It worked before, I promise.
Yeah, we tested it.
So you can see the contour of the panel, which is the big feature of a tambour panel. You can actually do any kind of irregular shape, curves. You can have them flat. They can be at angles in a straight line. So you're actually much more liberated from the rectangular footprint of a cabinet in the traditional sense. You can have a curved facade, both in the horizontal direction or in the vertical direction, without actually having to make curved doors, which can be quite challenging with bent laminations and things like that. So the tambour panel offers a really viable alternative to be very free in your design, how you want to make that opening flow. Any luck?
Something changed.
Well, I'll just stand here and
Okay. Or I can.
No, it's filled that way. So here you see the element. Does the pointer work?
Let's see. So, be this middle button. Yes. So the pointer is over.
Yay! So you can see here already one main key element, and it is what we call the track. Yeah. So that runs most of the time parallel with the outside edge of the case, and the timbre panel will naturally follow that contour line. This piece is made in mostly solid wood in the panels. The casework can be done in many different ways, yeah, but we're talking solid wood sticks that are being attached to each other. You'll see it later how that works, but already the first key element. Here's a piece I built actually as a commission a number of years ago with a vertical slat timbre panel where the door opens sideways. So you can slide it from left to right, you can slide it from top to bottom. In this case, I featured some color work, so each individual slat got some different color treatment in the finishing. This is a very diluted aniline dye that picked up some colors in the environment where this piece stands. So there was a glass chandelier, and we picked up colors from that. Here's another example, again this time vertical. This is a home office type situation, actually a very large unit up against the wall, and he had all kinds of doors, glass doors, panel doors. You see some hand dovetailed casework here. However, he wanted one section that was completely enclosed and able to lock. That was where his computer screen is and other valuables. So that whole panel slides sideways. Now the beauty of this, as you can already tell, is that the door does not come your way when you open it up. So you need much less space in terms of depth. And as you see later on, the other element of the timbre panel is that as you open it, it basically disappears in the cabinet. You don't ever see it really. This is a piece that some of you may recognize from an earlier presentation I did years ago. Again, the lower section of this cabinet, two horizontal panels. I believe I have a close-up photo. This is a big hutch. It's actually 8 feet tall with two glass doors on top, a set of drawers that are sort of camouflaged behind some glass art, but storage down here. And in this case, very, very site-specific, the application of timbre panels, because there is in the house where this piece stands, there's a tall wooden column, like an old historic wooden, like almost 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet. You could never open a door, it would get in the way. So timbre was actually the only real alternative to make that work, to have that cabinet stand there and still not be have that column in the room as an obstacle. So very practical in that sense.
Is that here in New Mexico?
No, that piece is in California. So here's a close-up of this two timbre panels. Another feature that I can point out is after each panel there will be a final piece. We'll get to that later when I talk about the step-by-step process. But it's basically a cap piece that you want to create for various reasons. In this case, we needed surface to mount these pulls. Yeah? In other case, this could be an element where we can mortise a lock and embed a lock in this piece of wood. Also notice how when you look at the pattern of the wood, that it is a very random mix. You don't really see continuous grain patterns. Yeah? So I did that deliberately, and I'll come to that later on. I'll come back to that, why. But just so you get a sense what that looks like, when you have the sticks kind of mixed up, and when you step back a little bit, it actually creates a nice, handsome look without, being out of order. Yes, please.
What do you use to lubricate the track on the Tambour?
I'll get to that later, how we make it run smoothly when we go to the step-by-step process.
What is that wood?
This is a very exceptional chunk of mahogany from Belize that had a beautiful figure to it. You can see this wavy pattern here. Yeah, this is all mahogany, a very golden color, exceptional. It didn't have many red tones, it was more gold. And I bought it from Hearn Lumber in Pennsylvania. Some of you may know this. The Lexus dealership of lumber yards. So here's yours truly, Tom's hutch, as he built it in our classes at the community college. And Tom Koor here from, and he applied 2 timbre panels in the lower section of his hutch, and the upper section has glass doors and glass shelves and 3 drawers in the center. A piece that took him a long time to build in our classes. Every Friday he came to class, and I have more photos. We can look at it more detailed. Here, look at what we created. The pattern. Each stick had a tiny little shape to it, a little profile, and created some texture. And then he repeated it in reverse, some kind of a scallop pattern in the fronts of the drawers and also in casework. You can barely see it here. That scallop pattern repeats, but it's a nice reverse of the texture that the timbre panel created. So timbre panels give you opportunity not just to close a space, a volume in a cabinet, but it's treated like a canvas. It's an opportunity to create texture by patterns. It's always, obviously we have a pattern going on. We have dozens and dozens of sticks attached to itself. And you can shape them, you can give them profiles, you can play with color, and as you will see later, you can literally use it as a canvas. Oops, that's not... I thought I had 2 more pictures of yours. I added 2 of yours. Okay. They may pop up out of sequence. So this is another example, different scale, much smaller this time. A jewelry case that is about the size of a small suitcase, and with 2 compartments to the left and right of the lid that roll into the back. Yeah. This piece is made of pear wood. The casework is pear with an embedded drawer in the front, and the panel is Hawaiian koa wood.
What was the wood on Tom's piece?
Oak. White oak.
Is it done yet?
Oh, it's home. It's home. It's most certainly done. Just the same piece in an open position. And here you can see how you slide that timbre panel and it reveals a compartment down below. And key always is, the beauty of that is, as you slide it open, it disappears. You don't even see the backside of it. It just basically rolls itself up in some secret compartment, and we'll get to that. So you have to provide for that space when you build a cabinet with timbres to create that effect. Yes, please.
Is the pear wood kind of tricky to finish? Do you have to do certain steps before the final?
No, pear wood finishes beautifully. You may get some irregularities in the growth that get you tear out in the milling process. I don't know if you can see, but there is a little bit of waviness in the grain here.
So is that a spray on?
Yeah, this is a hand-rubbed oil finish. 3 coats of tung oil, of waterlogs. Very nice. Yes, please.
Does it roll?
It doesn't roll itself up into a coil, but it rolls into a different space as a panel. And we'll get to that in detail later. Now here's where a tambour panel was used literally as a canvas. This is a piece that I was involved in building back in the day when I was still employed. I worked for a furniture designer in Rhode Island for a while. This was his commission, a liquor cabinet for a rather pompous condominium in the Trump Tower in New York. And very fitting these days, right? But look how these panels actually became paintings. An oil painter was a painter was hired to do an oil painting on it, and even what appears to be styles of a door frame are actually tiny little sticks of maple and purple heart wood alternating to mimic the effect of a maple door frame up here. So it's basically replicating the look from above. This is the same feel. Again, the painting disappears, rolls into the cabinet all by itself. And she painted on the canvas, on the flat panel. This time, of course, each stick was kept completely flat, no profiling, no shaping whatsoever, just stick to stick to stick to create a flat wooden panel. She painted on it, and then with a razor blade, she cut through the dried paint and separated each slat again so they can roll around the track. That was a pretty spectacular effect. Here you can see again the fake door frame, actually composed of 3 little sticks. It's actually a tambour panel. It's all one panel. Do you understand how that came together?
Does it turn the corner, you're saying?
It's all turning the corner, yeah. Everything will disappear. The entire painting rolls into the cabinet. Yeah. Yes, please.
Sorry, I don't think I heard you. Did you say she painted on the panel itself?
Yeah, on the wood. Yeah, and when I say panel, it's the accumulation of all the sticks assembled together. And it looks like a flat piece of white wood.
How does that stand up to repeated uses and cycles over the years? Does that paint wear, or does it chip, or how robust is it?
I haven't set foot into the Trump Tower ever since 1987. So I was in there a long time ago. Good question, but what you need to consider is that the outside surface never touches anything. Even in all the motion back and forth, it never has any contact. The outside face. Only the top and bottom edges of the panel. They have contact and have some friction, but if you're careful, this can last a long time. Yes, please.
What was the total cost for that cabinet?
I actually don't know, because I was just a lowly helper at the time. A lot. That was pretty spectacular. We drove our truck, because there's no parking on Fifth Avenue, so we drove our truck into the delivery elevator in the Trump Tower and entered the building with our big truck. It was pretty amazing.
Now, if you go back to that for just a minute, you have kind of an angled corner there. You can't bend a sharp angle with the tambour, so is there a
This here?
minimum radius that you can run one?
You can go pretty tight. The radius of the curve, I believe you're totally safe with 2-inch radius. That's a tight curve. Yeah? That's a gentler curve here, actually, because this is not a 90-degree corner here. It's a more obtuse angle.
But it's probably impacted by the width of your slats.
That's true.
How tight a radius.
And I'll review that in the detailed steps.
Question?
Yeah.
Were the slats glued onto the backing when the painting was done?
They were all already attached to the canvas backing, yes. Again, another completely different application, a jewelry cabinet with 2 tambour panels that open in opposite directions. I want you to pay attention to the little clasp on top. the black elements belongs to each panel, but they're held together by the little clasp so they don't fall apart. Here you see it more in detail. Yeah. This time I kept the slats really flat, no texture, no profiling, because I wanted to feature the curly maple. That was exciting enough for me to, just by my choice of wood. Small scale, this piece is 7 inches wide, 8 inches wide.
So where does the clasp go when you want to read it? How does that work?
It becomes the magnetic drawer pull. So let's go to this photo. This is how the panel opens. It disappears. Half of the black handle belongs to the other lid. And now here's the other half, the other black. This is a groove, and it can grab both of these black handles together, and therefore they don't slide apart. Now it's also magnetic, so here's actually an embedded drawer, which is a whole different talk in itself, how to do that. You see the continuous grain here. It's uninterrupted, drawer front. You can actually not even see it here in the photo. But there it is, comes out, and the magnet catches the magnet embedded in the ebony, and you pull out the drawer. So, sort of catching two birds with one stone. I have a clasp. I needed something to hold my timbre panels together. And then when I want to open that, what do I do with this thing? I don't want it to lose, right? So I'll just use it as a drawer pull. Macassar ebony, in case you're not familiar with it, curly maple for the casework. Macassar ebony, it is the ebony that is not thoroughly black. That is Gaboon ebony, when it's totally black, basically stained black, almost, yeah. Macassar has these streaks of pink and brown in them for a premium dollar. Yes?
Your magnetic pull, do you have felt on the back of it to keep it from scarring the finish?
No, that would have weakened the magnet too much.
Okay.
I needed full wood-to-wood contact to get the effect. For the size magnet I selected, if I had chosen a stronger rare earth magnet, maybe I could have done that. A little padding. And here, that is the most recent exotic example of using the timbre panel as a surface. This is a photographic print on maple, on soft maple. I did this piece when I taught a class on how to build timbres at Penland School of Crafts in North Carolina. And I collaborated with a photography instructor who happened to be on campus at the same time. And we created this moving photo on a box that is, not that large. Very exciting to collaborate to do that. Yes?
You put a finish on that?
Onto the photo. Everybody asks that question. It's really interesting. And I talked to the printer. He was a professional printer, and he says, no. Just let it dry. It has oils in it. The pigment, it's strong enough. You don't have to do that. Yes, please.
So on your jewelry boxes, did you ever see the jewels inside? I mean, was there a system that the people put their diamonds in top and their emeralds and
What do you mean, that they are visible in the closed position, or?
No. It was, you just didn't build one, you built many of these. Did you see a pattern of
How they get used?
how they got used by the owner?
No, sometimes it's kind of crazy. One husband told me once of the lady who got the jewelry case that a thief would not understand that the jewelry case is more expensive than her jewelry. She did not collect diamonds and rubies and gold.
He didn't tell his wife that, though.
No, she got a good chuckle out of it now. Yes.
Sir, you mentioned that the photograph is on the maple.
Yeah.
But is it like a liquid emulsion spread on the maple,
Yeah,
or is
how-
there
how is it paper put on
or
there?
some other kind of background?
No. It's a process called photogravure, and it gets literally pressed into the wood, and you have to make a plate, a photographic print plate, just like you would print on embossed paper. Yeah. And he was shocked that he can create this effect on wood directly. And the definition is stunning, the detail that was revealed. So again, a nice opportunity to treat it like a canvas. It's not just a piece of wood that covers an opening.
What were the trees?
I took this photo in Redwood National Park, Northern California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could just as easily been color photos as well as
No, because in the photogravure process, the kind of pigments that he uses is one batch. He mixes black with some, what's that called?
Yes, so.
No, the brownish tone. What is that called?
Amber.
Yeah. He mixed that and he came up with this dark brown
Burn umber.
ink. Yeah. And so it becomes a version of a black and white photo. Yeah. Yeah, that was the limitation of that. And you could actually, we don't see it in the photo now, but when you look up close, you actually see the grain of the wood a little bit.
So where did you find the photographer to do that?
The photographer, that was me.
No, I'm sorry.
The printer. I was at Penland School of Crafts. It's one of those art schools like Haystack Mountain in Maine, Anderson Ranch in Colorado, where you have all these different disciplines on campus, and you sign up for a 1 or 2 week class, and you basically live as one big art commune for the time that you're there. The shops are open 24/7. The instructor is available all the time, and so it's very. There's a lot of cross-pollinating going on. Yeah. So this happened literally 10 o'clock at night. I'm going back to my housing from my after teaching my class, and I walk past the print shop, and I'm like, what do those guys do? What are they here for? And I put 2 and 2 together, and we came up with this collaboration. And I built this piece in front of my students so I can demonstrate the process of how to make tambours. So again, key element, because we'll revisit this in the more technical part of the presentation, that the panel has disappeared. You don't see it. This is the bottom. This is the visible bottom of the case. Yes, please.
Would that printing process be beyond us here unless we had specialized equipment to actually do that?
I believe at the community college in Santa Fe, we might have a press that can do that, but it was one of those old-fashioned presses with a big wheel and lots of pressure down, and it's actually a very old-fashioned process. Yeah. Good. So now let's get a little more technical. So I built this little cabinet, and this is still a photo where it's almost done. This is just the case. You can see there is no track here yet. This is just assembled with basic case joinery. In this case, I kept it really simple, just dowels. Dowel joinery for the case. Don't pay too much attention to that. That is no requirement. I just needed a quick and dirty way to assemble a case. But I want you to pay attention to these 2 vertical dividers that become a second wall. And then, voila, there's a little space in between. Well, that is the space where my timbre panel will hide. When I gave a class in the community college, how long ago was that, Tom?
Several years.
5, 6, 7 years ago. I taught a summer class for a week or 2, a week. I don't remember. And we built a case together. We ended up calling this the garage. That's where you park. That's where you park the timbre panel. So you will hear me refer to the garage. So now you know what that looks like just in the case. Yeah, here a better view. There's actually no back panel in that section, but there's a back panel in the visible part. The back panel is actually a little further to the front. It doesn't go all the way to the back because I need that space in the back to hide my timbre panel. So this is basically a false back.
So it doesn't all stay right in the garage, you circle around the back.
Well, that depends on how wide this is. I mean, this cabinet is obviously wider than deep. So you do the math, I cannot hide the entire width of this in just the depth of the cabinet. So it has to continue and flow around the back side. All right, so here we come to the first key element. This is the top of this cabinet. And maybe, I mean, would it distract you if I put the cabinet on the bench? And I can actually refer to some of it. Does that limit the view? Perfect. So this is the top panel, upside down. You see the dowel holes of my case joinery, and you see a piece of plywood, or melamine in this case. Maybe it was 1/2 inch thick, maybe it was 3/8, I don't quite remember. And I have a small handheld laminate trimmer router, and in its router base I have embedded the guide bushing. Who's not familiar with the guide bushing? Guide bushing is a ring that is embedded in the base of the router, and it sticks out a little bit. It has a round circumference and a hole in the middle. So the bit comes through the hole in the middle, but now it is surrounded by a ring. That ring can read an edge. It can follow an edge. And so the way I usually explain that, it tells the router where to go. The router is a really versatile machine for the woodworker, but it's extremely dumb. It doesn't know what to do all by itself. So you need to tell the router where to go. Otherwise it wreaks havoc. Yeah? As some of you may have found out.
Amen.
Yeah. The thickness planer is really smart. It knows what to do. It makes it parallel and beautiful and flat, and yeah. The router, not so much. So the guide bushing, you can see there's a metal ring in here. That's part of my guide bushing. I created this white panel to outline my track. My track has a certain shape. In the cabinet here, there's a round track here. Up here, it's actually, this is convex, this is concave a little bit. So that is the outline of my track. I used a 1/4 inch straight down spiral bit. And I can do this in one pass. And that is key. I want to be really careful doing this because I need to maintain contact. The guide bushing has to be in contact with the template at all times. The moment I drift away, my track just did this. Yeah? So very careful. Remember how that was a bit nerve-wracking when we did that? So that's why I used the little handheld router, because I feel I have much better control maintaining contact. And it's not a big job. It's only going in 1/4 inch in depth. The bit itself is very shallow, is very small, so doesn't have to work hard.
So one pass?
In one pass.
And did you use a trim router?
It's a laminate trimmer, handheld, the little guy, but with a guide bushing. Yeah, I don't use it as a trim router in that sense. That's clear so far? So that's how I prepare tracks on both the opposite sides. Now the key element of a timbre panel to work is that the tracks that guide the panel have to be exactly in alignment. They cannot be off, even by the same shape. They cannot be off, otherwise it will never work. It's sort of the same principle as traditional butt hinges. It all has to be in alignment in order to work. They cannot be offset, otherwise the pivoting doesn't work. Same principle in the timbre. Also, the timbres have to be completely rectangular to the track. Yeah? Some students asked me, wouldn't it look fun if I did my slats at a slight angle? But you all, I can take by your reaction, you get the impossibility of it would never make it around the curve. It would work in a straight line as a sliding door, but as a timbre it wouldn't work. So those are the design limitations. You are sort of a slave to being perpendicular to the track that you have created.
What about wood movement?
Wood movement?
Over years.
Well, this is all about movement. This whole thing, yeah. It's no. This is a whole different animal. By cutting the wood up, I mean, this used to be solid wood. Now it's all cut up into little sticks.
I'm thinking about the track.
You killed its mojo. I mean, it's not doing anything anymore. Oh, you think about the track in solid wood casing.
Right.
Good point. Doesn't really matter.
Doesn't move enough to make a difference.
No, and even if it did, even if it moves a lot,
Okay, the top and bottom move to the
they move together. Top and bottom are, of course, need to be made out of the same material, either solid wood or in this case, it's a substrate, it's a plywood, and they move together, and the shape that I created is random as it is. It's completely arbitrary. So if that shape warped a little bit from wood movement, the timbre doesn't care. That's the beauty of it. Yes, please. Oh no, you were first.
Timber strips that chip of them, the top and the bottom, or if it's a flat each side, do they notch down so that...
You will see that in detail in photos, yes. There is a treatment of the ends of the sticks, yes.
So after you ripped each stick to make your timbre, did you let it dry a certain amount of time and then recheck? Then you did a selection of which ones were straight?
I will come to that. Yes, it's a good point. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of, okay, how do we make 100 sticks? Yeah? Yes, please.
Does your depth or your width of your track change depending on how big the timbre is or how thick the pieces are?
Honestly, I mean, yes, that little jewelry cabinet had a smaller cross-section of track, yes, and thickness of slats than like that roll-top desk, for example. Yeah, you would be more generous in your dimensions. Yes?
How did you proof or make sure both pieces were...
In alignment?
Yeah, alignment.
Well, my joinery takes care of that. I mean, my joinery, of course, maintains an alignment of the pieces to themselves. And when I attach this template to either the top panel or the bottom panel, I have a way of, okay, it needs to be half an inch from the back, or, I measure
Index it.
that, yeah, index, that's the word, that they are in the same position. So, see this little hole there? I want you to remember that. There are two of those in the template because it enables me to put a locating pin of my template into the panel. You all understand this panel can be solid wood, it can be plywood, it doesn't really matter. But while I do the process, I want to make sure that my template is not only secured with clamps while I'm routing, but I also want to find a dedicated way to place it. So these are locator pins, and I only need two on diagonally across, so my template is guaranteed sitting in the same position. Also here you see the grooves that receive my future fake inside wall to create the garage.
Do we see the dowels and were they, did they actually come into that groove? Or
Oh, see how, yeah, I actually accidentally routed into the dowels. My bad. So it wasn't intentional. No, not really. I mean, if I just touch them, I just kiss them a little bit, that's, no. I mean, ideally you don't want to do that, but it just turned out that my material was thin enough. Yes, please, in the back.
You were talking about being careful with the router to make sure you're hugging your template.
Yes.
But I'm curious about when you're shaping the template itself, do you have to take special care that you don't have any little ripples in the edge?
Very good point. Thank you for addressing that. He asked about the care to take in shaping your template. The curvature here, these slot arcs, the radius that will define how the timbre flows around the corner, that wants to be completely without bumps. The key is, how do I reduce friction the most? Yeah? We want to fight friction, so we have a nice easy flow, and we want to keep those curves as fair as possible, and take good care in creating good edges on the template, so the router can copy it flawlessly. Yes?
you want to pay attention to the direction of rotation of your router?
Well, not really, because the router, when it makes the track, is surrounded by wood. So it doesn't really matter in which direction you go. It's one.
You want the bit to crowd into the template.
Crowd into the template. Well, I know what you're saying, climb cut, regular cut, but when you have that little removal, that little material, you will hardly tell the difference. Yeah. So I actually found, whatever feels right, that I can hug, as he said, that I can maintain hugging the template.
And you use a template, a bearing versus a bit with
guide
with a bearing on it.
You cannot use a flush turn bit. No, you cannot use a bit with a bearing. That will not work, no. Because you need the tip of the bit digging into your panel. You can't do that with a flush trim bit that has the ring at the end, the bearing at the end.
Even if the bearing was on the top, you could do a top bearing that feels it.
They make pattern bits that are very that top.
I've never tried it that way. If you have the right size bit, it might work. It would have to be a really short bit, or a very thick template. Yeah. No, that might work. Yeah.
When you did the radius with the router, did you get any tear out, or was everything just nice and smooth?
It got pretty smooth. It gets a little fuzzy, but you go into the track later and sand it. Yeah. You try to clean it up some. There is some fuzziness happening in the curves. Yes.
Did you have any trouble with that handheld router? Because it looked like the same one I got. I was engaging it to the template, bringing it down.
No, you don't do that, because what we haven't talked about yet is the entry. See how this is straight and then it begins to curve, and I am away from my outside edge. I should use the pointer. That's much more elegant. So here, the back of my template is flush with the back of my wood. But very soon, in a very gentle curve, and that's key, a very shallow curve, I begin to enter the track into the panel. This is the rear of my piece. So, because you need to be able to remove your timbre panel after your case was glued up. So you cannot trap your timbre panel after you glue up top and bottom of your casework, but you need basically an entry point. It is hidden behind my false back. Yeah? You all understand the element of the entry. So back to the gentleman who asked the question of dipping in. I don't have to plunge in. I can just turn on outside, get going, and gently enter my template that way. And again, key is the locator pins that really define this point of entry.
That entry point is beyond where the tambour panel is going to go when it's fully open. It's way beyond that.
It's way beyond that, otherwise it will start sticking out. And that's not actually that funny, you need to do the math. Oh damn, you know? You can have a bad surprise. Okay, we talked about this. All right, now here comes a little specialty. This was my original radius of my template. Then I routed my track on both the opposing panels, and they're exact mirror images of each other. So now I draw out and make the radius different. I make it a little smaller, and I reshape my template. So how much is this? Maybe 1/16 of an inch, generously.
Otherwise, the timber will bind as it goes.
So then I alter my template in these, however many curves I have, these tight corners I need to make. And I reattach my template to my panel. Thank you, locator pins. It goes right back to where it was before. And now I'm going to route again, carefully, never to plunge in, because I could even create a tiny little discrepancy. I enter from my entry point, come in, and now I hug the template on its new radius curve. What does that mean?
Wider.
In that section, my track just got wider. I made it wider, maybe by about 1/16 of an inch. And that will help my slats to make the turn. There's wobble now, there's space, there's room to breathe in the tight curve. They are less likely to bind when I go around the corner. Yes, please.
So if you're adding the extra width on your curve, how tight do you keep the dimension, your slats to your groove, to your track?
We'll come right to that. That depends on, of course, the size, let's be more specific, the width of the slat. Yeah, it wants to be able to make that turn. And let me see what the next picture is. Here you can see how that is wider than here. Yeah, you can see that a little bit.
So the only bad news part about that is once you do that, you ruin that template for the next one.
That's right. But we do one-of-a-kind work. We don't make series of 10. No, no, you're right. You're right. It is a disposable item. Yeah. Yes, please.
So you're going to have to choose joinery in your cabinet that you can take apart and put together a bunch of times as you're adjusting this, correct?
No. No. I do this only on free panels. I never have to assemble anything yet at this point. No, I can just, no. I don't see any reason why I have to put this together, and I couldn't even check if this was in alignment. How would I do that? How would I measure that? No, I just trust the individual case panels and work on them individually freely.
This MDF core.
Yeah, this is just a cheap MDF core with mahogany veneer. Yeah. So that's the detail of the expanded curve. All right, now we come to slat making. Bunch of sticks, and you had a question about it earlier. So what's an efficient way to make a bunch of little sticks? And we have a couple of issues here. Safety on the machines. How can we handle small dimension stock on jointers, on table saws, and so forth? This stick is 3/8 of an inch wide, I believe. Yeah. And maybe 5/16 thick. 3/8 wide, 5/16 thick. So they're little rectangles. Then, if you look closely, I actually gave them a profile. Yeah? So they're not just flat. You can see here, we have a texture, a little ripple effect, tiny little curves in the profile. So I don't rough mill every single stick on the bandsaw and then go over the jointer with it and thickness planer. That doesn't strike me as safe. Plus, when you joint something this thin, it's actually so flexible that it's really hard to get a bow out of a piece. So I start out by milling pieces of a much larger width, maybe a piece of wood that can hold up to 6 sticks later on. Pieces of wood that are much safer to handle on the jointer. I joint them. I actually go another step. While they are still white pieces of wood, I have a drum sander in my shop, so I can actually sand them on both faces and clean them up already quite a bit. So I have already 2 clean faces. And then I joint one edge, and then I rip it on the table saw, one stick after another. And I rip them off. 3/8 wide, that's relatively safe. But I'm done with jointing and thickness planing before, while it is still larger, wider stock. Someone had a question. Yes, please.
I'm curious, if you're doing this on a horizontal basis instead of a vertical like what you've got here, as their span increases, I would think you'd want thicker and thicker sticks so that you get the strength and the lack of deflection.
For example, that roll top desk in the beginning. Yeah, I bet you those sticks were at least 1/2 inch wide, maybe 7/16 thick, something like that. Maybe they were even wider. What does that mean? It reduces my ability to make tight corners the wider I get.
Or you have to increase that cheater groove on your corner.
Maybe by quite a bit, yeah.
Is there a maximum width that you can go practically?
I don't know, but I know what you're getting at. Don't underestimate though, once all these little sticks get attached with their shared panel of canvas, that thing is pretty stiff. It's pretty strong. Don't think of it as an individual stick that can bend. Sure. Yeah? So as a group, they have strength and they stay rather rigid.
Couldn't you trim the tip of it down so a smaller piece rides in that groove than the thickest of the timber?
Yeah.
For a smaller project, couldn't you contact a chopstick factory and just pre-order sticks and UPS drives up and there's your box?
Well, maybe you could, but then you don't have much control over the wood, what it's made of. Yeah, but of course, and what else happens here? Rejects. You're working along on the table saw, and many of you know when you separate a rather significant piece of wood from a main piece, that all of a sudden it bows. It doesn't stay straight anymore, right? So that's why I overproduce my sticks. I don't know, I could probably consider 10 to 20% waste, because I will remove the worst offenders. The ones that for some miraculous reason bend completely out of shape. Some bow I can handle, yeah, and you'll see later why. Some bowing is totally fine and is acceptable. They don't have to remain pristinely straight and square and all that. Well, they want to be square, but they don't have to stay straight. Some bending, some bowing is to be expected. Don't be disheartened by that. But you will see the real bad offenders. It's like, no way, gone. Yeah? So you throw out a few. Again, remember what I pointed out at the beginning, the random pattern of, because if you try to maintain, let's say I made these sticks out of a white piece of mahogany and I do stick, 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 and wouldn't it be fun if I can reassemble it and I see the flow of the flat sawn wood? almost impossible because you have losses.
Well, you're taking the kerf out of every.
And there's, of course, the loss of the curve, so the consistency of the grain is compromised already. Why bother? I like the random pattern much better anyways.
Okay, now if you used a bandsaw, you could reduce the kerf.
Yeah, but then how do you clean it up?
Yeah, that's okay.
You need to clean it up. And speaking of cleaning up, I told you about my handy little drum sander. Now I take all my sticks and I turn them 90 degrees, all of them. And in bundles of 5, 6, I sent them through the drum sander. And now I actually have 4 clean surfaces on all my sticks.
How do you hold them in place?
In the drum sander?
Yeah, I mean, they pop or-
No, I enter them, I hold them tight together.
Oh, okay.
5 and 6, 7, bring them in, and works really well. Especially if you have a travel board. You don't feed them onto the actual moving sandpaper of the drum sander, the moving belt, yeah. But if you actually have them on a substrate, on a flat, nice piece of MDF or something, and they're firmly held by that, you can do that. Yes?
When you're cutting the slats one at a time off the end of your wider piece, is the cut made away from the edge? In other words, are you trapping a narrow piece between the blade?
I'm trapping a narrow piece, 3/8 of an inch. I don't consider that terribly narrow. That is totally doable on a table saw. If you have the right push stick,
With a push stick.
you can certainly have a very safe and controlled cut of that width. So, of course, I want to be as consistent in my width as possible. I have same width. Yes, in the back, please.
When you're sanding them on your drum sander, do you keep them extra long to allow for any snipe?
Well, good question. I didn't mention that before. All these sticks are already extra long by design. Yeah. I have, of course, a calculated length here that they want to be, but they are kept extra long. In this case, actually, they represent both panels together, because I don't do this process twice. So I'll just make long sticks and I get 2 panels out of it.
How long are those in the picture?
Well,
2 feet?
maybe this long.
2.5. Yeah. After you've rejected the pieces that are curled, and if you do that, mix the rest up to avoid any partial patterns that might be emerging.
I mix them up quite deliberately. After I removed the rejects, the worst offenders of the sticks that aren't straight or acceptable anymore, will I try to maintain continuous grain as much as possible from how they came out of the pieces, but I just mix them all up. I don't want to maintain any neighboring pieces.
Pick up sticks.
Yes?
How do you, now you gotta go to create that curve that you
Yeah.
showed there.
What was your
Same question.
same question? Okay. And what was your before I address that?
On your table saw, do you use a regular curved blade or thin blade?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, I probably used my regular curved blade because I had enough wood. But if you want to be a little bit more economical, considering the number of cuts you have to do and the losses you have, you are more economical if you use a thin curved blade. It gives you the same clean cut. It's not hard work for the table saw to do this kind of ripping. It's minimal stock. So that would be a good idea to use a small curved blade. Yeah. Yes?
Go back to ripping that between the fence and the saw blade.
Yeah.
You don't, man, that always bothers me, that narrow, that thin a piece. You don't, do you ever do that and just rip off the thickness and you have to reset your fence for every time? You don't care for that, huh?
I know what you're doing, the reasoning behind that, and I do your process, for example, when I want to create a thin piece of veneer for a patch job or something. Yeah, I could never set the fence that thin. Yeah, that wouldn't make sense. So I create a thin piece of waste that falls off safely to the open side of the blade, and I use that as basically making my own veneer if I needed something that thin. That's when I use that technique. When I want to do 100 sticks of the same width, what you're suggesting is not really practical. It would drive me insane probably to do that. And it would be hard to get the same width. Yeah. But I, we can talk about it after the presentation. I mean, why is that uncomfortable for you? Because with the proper push stick and the proper setup on the table saw, that is, I would consider that a standard ripping procedure to rip something 3/8 of an inch. So maybe I can give you some pointers on how that could be more comfortable for you.
Keep your blade low.
Yeah? Yes, please.
How long do you let those dry before actual glue on?
Not long at all. You want to keep going. When you separated these bunch of little sticks, you don't want to give them any chance to change their mind. You keep going. Do not sticker them and let them dry and all that, because they really might turn on you. So that's not a good idea. Please pay attention to my custom-made sanding block with the profile, with a little curvature here. But of course I routed this first. Yeah. You can create you can see this is not a bullnose, this is not a quarter round. This is a segment of a circle of much larger radius. You can create that with a quarter round router bit that is much larger than the stick. And you route from both sides. You flip them over, turn around, and you can create a nice, smooth, shallow circle segment of profile. Of course, where both cuts meet might be a little ridge. That's why I made my little sanding block to clean that up. So that's just one example how you can treat the visible surface of a tambour slat. A very common one is a bevel, a nice 45-degree bevel on each end of the slat, a bevel, and when they all come together, they make a whole bunch of V's, a lot of V grooves. Could be a nice, interesting pattern for you.
Is that alternating bevels?
No, always the same bevel, always the same bevel, alternating sides.
Do you worry about the slight kerf marks resulting from the ripping process, since they're not really visible?
They're not really visible, but remember, I did remove them because I sent them through the drum sander. Yeah, I turned them 90 degrees. So what used to be the saw marks are now cleaned up. You could even thickness plane them if you wanted. Yeah. Good stopping point for a break, I think. All right, welcome back. A question right away. Go ahead.
Before you jump away from this, are you routing those curves on the edge of your board before you rip them, or are you doing
this profile, you mean? No, I did that individually. And you can even go as far as making a holder, because now we're getting a little delicate, right? A small stick and up against the router, we want to get a clean profile. We need to maintain good pressure up against the fence. You can actually, I don't have a photo of this. It would explain so much more than many words, but you can embed this in some kind of a holder. Tom, you did this on yours, to run it along the router, yeah. For safety, yeah. And also for consistency of cut, so it doesn't get so shaky and wavy. And you want to reduce the amount of sanding. That's, yes, please.
A couple of questions. I'm going to go back onto the radius, the curve. Do you cut that relief radius on all your tracks, the timbre tracks?
You mean the extension of the tight corner section?
You do it on all of them?
What do you mean by all of them?
Regardless of the size of the curvature, do you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So it doesn't make, it's not radius related. It's
Well, I would say it's a principle. You should do it in principle on every corner that you do it, as at least every time you do a 90-degree corner. Yeah, if you do a shallow dip, you don't have to do it. But if it's a tight 90-degree, I recommend that you expand the track by that amount.
How much slop do you have in the guide areas? The channels, top and bottom, how much slop do you have in there? I.e., how much wider is it than the boards?
Okay, we'll get to that. So, okay, we've made sticks, yeah, we're all on board. We made a bunch of sticks, we cleaned them up. They are still extra long, and they are profiled to your taste. They're good to go. We're getting ready for assembly. Now we have to group them together into a panel. And here's one way how you can do this. By the way, just want to address that this is one particular technique how you can create a timber panel. There are other approaches how you can create a group of sticks held together to follow some kind of a curved track. Some of you may have seen that router bit that can create a profile on both edges of the slat that is like a hip joint. It grabs each other and it goes along the entire edge of each slat, and they grab each other, and one is a positive, negative, positive, negative. And so you actually do not have a material in the back, for example a canvas, that holds them together. They're actually holding themselves together just on their own. That's a special kind of router bit that you need to buy that is designed to create that interlocking profile. I'm not a big fan of it. I have only limited exposure to it, but I have found the panels to be a little loose and sloppy. The sticks, they don't create that tight look the way I can get it with canvas. That could have been just my own impatience or my own limited experience with that. Maybe other people had better luck. There's also another principle where you can drill a hole, or I should say maybe 1, 2, 3 holes into the sides of each stick and pull them together with a wire, with a string. Yeah, and so I've seen that done.
That's cheating.
Cheating is buying the whole panel, which is possible. So here, what you see is I created a panel. This piece of plywood, 3/4 ply. Then I put a frame around it, piece of poplar, very thin, probably just 1/4 inch thick. And I screwed it on, creating a perfect 90-degree space. Now my sticks, I told you earlier, are extra long, but they're all the same length. That was part of my milling. I forgot to mention that before. They are all cut to universal length, so I can all fit them into this space that I created. And key is that my slats go into the space upside down. So now the inside face is visible, and that's the face that I did not treat. It's just flat straight from the planer or from the sander. And it is thicker than the surrounding wood. That is very important, that we stay just below.
Thicker?
The timber slats are proud of the surrounding frame. The frame basically just guides them into a perpendicular position. I made sure that this frame is at 90 degrees, and so the sticks just follow that. There is a piece of wood here on the side that is this here, and I pull it tight with clamps. Now, somebody asked earlier how much play is there, and so I can actually pull this tight. I go back to the previous picture. Oh, I should forget I have this. 2 clamps will do the job. And you'd be surprised how much play there is between these sticks. And now this is where we eliminate some kind of bowing that has occurred in the milling process. We'll just press them together. They're all flexible by themselves. They don't resist much. But you want to make sure that you maintain a parallel rectangle, because I could easily stress this clamp more than that one, and the whole thing becomes a trapezoid. So you just double check, and you basically do this until you see all the visible gaps have closed. You want them to really touch each other. You don't have to kill yourself to do this. Plus, at one point, the whole thing will just explode in your face. Well, right now, good faith. But so I just do it as much as I need to keep them, to close the gaps. And then I call it a day. And then in the next photo, you see how this strip of wood that I used to pull them tight has screw holes in it. So now I screw that into my base panel. Remember, we're sitting on a piece of 3/4 plywood. Now I'm basically locking in that position by screwing.
Now it's just sliding up till then.
Up till then, it was just sliding. The clamps were able to slide it as far as I, dare to go. But there is a bit of a uncertainty. Like if I overdo it, this whole thing will start bulging out. But remember, we're also trapped tightly end to end. So there is friction. It's not popping out quite easily. It's pretty well locked in. Yes?
Are you having to tap the slats to keep them all?
Yeah, while I do this, I constantly tap them down with a mallet and a flat piece of wood, because I want this top surface to be as flush as I can. Yeah? And since my sticks in my design are all the same thickness, I can just keep pounding them down onto my base plate. Yes?
Have you applied any finish, and have you cut them to final length already?
No and no. Did you all hear his question? Nothing is finished yet. Everything is extra long, but it is the same length.
Is there a particular reason why you don't finish the top side first before? Because when you apply the finish, it's going to bleed down into the canvas, whatever you're using.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. No, we'll get to that. I don't like to pre-finish too prematurely when I still have a fair amount of machine work coming my way. A lot of scratching and scarring possible, so I'd rather wait until then. But they are sanded. They are all finished and sanded at this point. So this was that, and now it's time to attach the canvas. I selected medium grade art canvas from the art supply store. They come in lightweight, medium weight, heavyweight. I like to choose the medium weight, and I have the luxury of using a vacuum press. But we can talk about alternatives as well. So no fear. But in this case, I just walk you through the process with the vacuum press. So what you see here is I'm actually already in the press. So what we do is this is now what we're doing is we're gluing on the canvas. The canvas is what holds all the sticks together on the invisible inside of the panel. And you can see how I cut it. I cut it very generously. It's oversized. You can see here the markings of my final crossbar that I pulled tight to close all the sticks together. And it's even overlapping into the surrounding frame. So that's why I wanted the sticks of the Tambours slat to be proud. So whatever glue pressure I apply does not get inhibited by a surrounding frame. We want the slats to be the main contact surface. What do I use for gluing on? I use synthetic hide glue, not yellow glue. And I have, for pressure, I have a roller, a hard rubber roller. I also have a mallet with a flat piece of wood, a nice hardwood, but good and flat for pounding this down. Again, you want to do this repeatedly before you apply pressure, that they are all flush with each other. Just keep knocking them down. And I have, of course, the vacuum press. Who is not familiar with what a vacuum press is? Vacuum press is basically a large piece, a bag of plastic, a very heavy-duty synthetic material. Inside, you slide a panel of plywood that has a bunch of little channels in it. Very shallow channels, 8 by 8, just table saw curves, yeah? This is handmade, this is homemade, this is a piece of melamine, and then all these channels were cut in. Then the bag gets closed up, sealed, and attached to a vacuum pump that sucks out all the air. And the atmospheric pressure, the weight of our atmosphere around us, becomes de facto the clamp pressure. The weight presses down as one big uniform clamp. And the beauty of it is that you can apply the pressure on very irregular forms. It's still the same pressure. Not necessarily in this case, we're using a flat surface, but very, very versatile for irregular forms. Yes, please.
Why the hide glue as opposed to yellow glue?
Good question.
What was the question?
The question was, why do I use synthetic hide glue instead of yellow glue? So here's the goal. The goal is that we want to adhere the sticks to the canvas. Why did I use canvas in the first place? It's nice and soft and pliable, right? It can follow any kind of curves very nicely. But I don't want the glue to saturate the fabric and become hard and stiff and limit the fabric's ability to be soft and pliable. I found that synthetic hide glue works really well. It's a good bond between wood and canvas, so it's sort of like two alien materials. It's not wood on wood, but it's wood and canvas. But it doesn't really saturate the canvas easily. It's not as liquid. It has more the consistency of honey, and so it doesn't penetrate the fiber of the canvas so easily. So we can keep it separate with limitations. I've had moments where I put on too much hide glue, and indeed it started to bleed into the canvas, and it does become hard and brittle and can actually break, and then it breaks the fabric as well.
What kind of open time do you have, and how do you spread it?
I don't know, like forever. It's really long. And I spread it out with either a comb, a glue comb, or with a glue roller. Either way, you spread the glue onto the wood, not onto the canvas. That's a mess. And then you just carefully place the canvas on it, right? With this assembly, slide the whole thing into the veneer bag and veneer. But also, and this is another benefit of the hide glue, it doesn't really require that much pressure to create a good bond. So you could actually use alternatives to the vacuum bag. You can have, I've done as simple as another piece of plywood and a bunch of toolboxes. Heavy weights from the gym, something. And that will do the trick.
Sit on it.
As long as you get even pressure, you want to spread it out with something like an in-between material. Yes?
In watching other people do this, I've seen them specify hide glue, but you're the first one I've ever heard say synthetic hide glue. What's the difference with them?
Have you ever worked with hide glue? No. That's why you asked the question. So, oops. Well, since I don't even know what synthetic hide glue is, to be honest, how they do that. Yeah? It has that same hideous smell, but natural hide glue has to be in a warm water bath at all times. You cannot put it on a burner. It has to be in a water bath around it. So gentle heat at all times. It has a rather permeating smell that just is rather gross. And it has very limited open time. The moment it cools down, it gets hard and brittle. And so it's a much more stressful glue situation to work with natural hide glue. It is, of course, the glue of choice when you restore antique furniture, where it was built with hide glue originally, and the hide glue is reversible. You can apply heat and moisture, and you can actually separate again. So if you want to maintain authenticity in valuable antiques, you must work with hide glue. You cannot introduce synthetic glue that can actually diminish the value. We're talking real antiques. So that's where I would use hide glue. But it's just much less practical. Now I have a plastic bottle and I squeeze. It doesn't require any temperatures, no extra heat. Yeah. I like these sandbags that this gentleman pointed out earlier. Those were used with hide glue in the past. You heated sandbags. We're talking 18th century. You heated sandbags and you put them on the wood to preheat the wood. And that way it bought you 2 more minutes or something. Yeah, maybe more. But yes, please.
Is there a particular reason why you can't use something like a contact cement? Put it on the panel and the hide and the canvas. Excuse me.
I have no answer for that. That's not a bad question. I would probably find it a little tedious to apply contact cement to fabric. That's kind of messy. But I don't know. Maybe it could work. Could be worth an experiment. Yes, please.
What's the point of the curves of the table? Just straight lines?
Here, it sucks the air out from underneath. So air doesn't get trapped in between. So you need to get all the air out, and to create the strongest vacuum and therefore more clamp pressure.
There's never increase in the sand on surface before we put the canvas on. What was the question?
How about sanding the entire surface of the slats? You mean this surface here, right? Sanding it before gluing. Well, they have already been sanded in this case, but now we want them really flush, right? Yeah, one could do that. Yeah.
But you're usually able to get it so that there's almost.
Yeah, you take a piece of wood and just keep banging it down. And eventually, because remember, there's a fair amount of pressure that holds them together, so we have a lot of friction. So they don't move much anymore. They're pretty much trapped in there. So again, the miracles of duct tape.
So even though this end looks like the tambours below the edge, it's because the tambours at that end, not this end. See, it looks...
No, the tambour panel is from here to here.
Right.
This is just extra wood because I use this panel, this base panel, for other tambours as well, where I needed more. Yeah, so key is for a vacuum bag, for those who are not familiar, these corners here, this is a piece of wood, need to be extremely rounded over. You don't want sharp edges, sharp corners exposed to the plastic under that pressure. It can really strain it. This is why we have the duct tape here. This is the bag at school, so it's been used frequently and gets abused over time. So you want to be mindful of that. Here's that little plastic tube that seals the bag. We cannot see the pump setup. It's below.
Your canvas is going to be glued to the frame around it in pieces.
No. The glue is only on the underside of the slats. There's nowhere else glue. The canvas is larger. Yeah, you don't want to spill over. Yeah, good question. You don't want to get glue on this and this. Yeah?
So some of the slab on the end won't get glue on it, right? You can't get it exactly to the end.
Remember, everything's extra long. It's all going to be trimmed off. Okay, let's move on. Now, this is what it looks like coming out of the panel. out of the press. The canvas now has been applied, and I trimmed off with a razor blade everything that went beyond the tambour slats. I just trim it off. I have a clean edge now. Remember, this was trapped in what is a perfect rectangle. So now I actually have a straight edge that I can use up against the rib fence. Although what I'm doing here is technically cross-cutting, but the length is long enough here to run it along the rib fence. In this case, I'm ripping it because I decided to make 2 tambour panels out of 1. If it was only 1 panel I made now, I would now trim it to final length. Yeah? And Tom might remember this. There's an interesting phase now. When it comes out of the glue process, the whole thing is rather stiff. Yeah? It's because of how much little glue maybe got squeezed into a gap here and there, just a little bit. And that actually helps us right now. We want to maintain that. We want to treat this very delicately as we move it around, because if you bump it, it goes blub, yeah? But you want to keep it rather stiff so we can run it over the table saw and do a couple of procedures that we need to do. And only at the very end do we all break it apart and make it soft and bendable. Yes, please.
I'm curious about the loose canvas.
Yeah.
On the end, what does the saw blade just go ahead and cut through that? Or?
Yeah, the saw blade does kind of cut through that. It's not a pretty sight, I have to admit. But I want to maintain some canvas here. I trimmed it off everywhere else, but I maintained a little canvas later, and I'll explain later why. So, and this is, by the way, the beginning of my panel. So I dedicate what is the beginning of my panel. Yeah? Not the invisible end, but the extra canvas I have here. Now, I will address this later where we cannot use this cabinet anymore as an example, because I didn't do this procedure here.
Is there a reason why you couldn't put that end piece in your clamp as part of your clamp and put the canvas on at that time?
I'll come to that later. Okay, so what am I going to do now? I'm creating a rabbit. Our slats have a full thickness, and of course we also have a little profile. But our track is only 1/4 inch. The thickness of my material, the slats, is 3/8. So the full thickness of the slat is not meant to go into the track. We want a thinner, basically a little tongue. We want to create a little tongue and groove situation here. And so I have to do 2 cuts on the table saw to create a rabbit. So we have a short little tongue on each end. If you look at this later, up close, you can see from the side that the last stick, you can see that tiny little tongue at the end. So how do I do a rabbit? I do a cross cut like that, where the height of the blade is only very small, a given distance from the rib fence, between blade and rib fence.
The tambour, when it's finished and installed, is going to ride on the cut, not the little tongue.
I'll address that in a second. One minute. So here is the first cut I did. No, sorry. Get too excited. All right.
There it is.
So this is what I just did, upside down. So I create a little cross cut, the shoulder of my rabbit, but there's still some material left. You can't quite see it. I have yet to do another cut in the perpendicular dimension to remove basically a shallow rabbit on both ends. And that thickness of that rabbit, that is really key now in how this will fit into our track.
Question?
Yes, please.
I apologize, this is a stupid question, but it's the only solution I know for stupidity. Why can't you use a straight bit and a router just to get that one time through?
To create a rabbit? Perfectly fine. You can make rabbits with a straight bit up against the fence on a router table, right? Now is not the time to take risks on tear out. I'm very close to finishing a Tambour panel that took me a long time to make. So routing rabbits to me is an increased risk in tear out. Cutting rabbits. The table saw, hardly any.
Could you set your table saw blade up on a dado type of a thing to get a wider cut?
No, I do it in 2 cuts. You saw the first cut I did, which is basically a cross cut creating a shoulder.
Is that on the back side?
I believe I have it's on the front. The shoulder cut was on the front. You can see this. What you see as a faint little shadow line here in the front, that is that shoulder cut I just did. Now I have to do a second cut that defines the thickness of the tongue. 90 degrees. But before I do that, I remove canvas. Remember, I actually glued canvas all the way to the end. But now I have to expose the wood that will later on run in my track. You cannot have canvas in the track. That is key. Way too much friction. So I remove, you can see it's a little fuzzy. Doesn't look all that clean sometimes, but you'd be surprised. It came off. The hide glue is not that super strong. That's another reason why we want to use that. And a little bit of scraping, a little bit of sanding to expose a lip of wood beyond the canvas. Now, the relationship between this surface of wood and what's on the other side, that's a certain thickness, that is a tongue, that will tell me if I fit into my track or not. I believe I have a photo of how that's done. Now that's my second cut, how I can create a rabbit. Featherboard, you can see it's beginning to move. Yeah, I'm losing some of the rigidity that came in so handy earlier, but you can do it. It does behave because the canvas holds it together so well. Featherboard gives me good sideways pressure up against the rib fence, and now I have, with micro adjustment on my rib fence, I can find just the right thickness of my tongue. Yeah? Yes, please, in the back.
Why don't you just finish the rabbit laying it down on the table saw? Just put a piece of wood against the blade, so you got space along the guide.
Yeah, I can do repeated cuts
horizontally, and you don't have to worry about sticking it vertically.
Did you all understand his question? If I had just changed my fence a couple of times, do repeated passes, I can create...
The blade is embedded in a piece of wood stock that you scrap so you stay away from the...
Because you need to get to 0, right? You need a sacrificial fence. Yeah, that's a way to do it. Now, you need a flat bottom tooth for that. Yeah, your tooth cannot be angled, which gives a nice clean cut, the angled tooth. But it has to be a flat tooth because we want to create not a V pattern of repeated cuts side by side. We want to create a flat pattern. I could have done a dado blade. I could have put together a dado stack, which creates a flat bottom of my cut, and do it all in one go. What I don't like about that procedure is it's the thickness that I'm after, right? It's the thickness. How thick is that tongue going to be in order to make it fit into my track? I personally feel I have more control over tapping my rib fence in ever so little movements and do it again and cut the tongue again than raising the blade. I feel I have less control because if I do it all in the lying down position like that, It is the height of the blade now that will determine the thickness of my tongue. Do you all understand that? And I don't really see what's happening here. Yeah? So it's a personal preference. In principle, you are right. The same goal could be achieved if you tell me the perfect height of the blade. If you have a way to find that. I find I have more control on the rib fence and tapping it left, right, like that, and get my right thickness.
Yeah, but when you have a real wide door, like say you got a 2-foot wide door, trying to get vertical through the table.
You can attach a tall fence. Many table saws have a tall fence attachment. That will be very helpful. But I know where you're going, and there are more ways to skin a cat, more than one ways, yeah. Totally doable. We all have our preferences. But in principle, I want to encourage you that this kind of saw work is not a horror show. This is standard table saw procedure.
You talk about keeping that panel, not letting that flex or pop apart. Isn't that quite a concern as you're bringing it up sideways and handling it? It seems like it's a pretty delicate piece to cut on its edge.
Yeah. But that's why I have a feather board. The moment the feather board engages, everything stiffens up. Tom.
You saw a picture of my hutch. My hutch door is about the height of
This
cabinet.
cabinet.
I don't think we use we just use the standard fence, and it helps not to breathe when you're doing it.
It really wasn't appropriate to have your heart stop temporarily.
So, I saw you remove the canvas on the back side to, let's call it a quarter of an inch.
Yeah.
You're rabbiting the front side. Do you rabbit the back side?
No.
Just to remove the canvas?
Just to remove the canvas. And any kind of glue residue that might still be there, I need to carefully remove and sand it. Takes only a few minutes. Very short process. So we are now creating the contact surfaces in our track.
Right.
Yes?
How are you removing that canvas? Are you putting a guide down there and a razor cut along there and then peel it?
Peel it off and scrape a little with a scraper. Yes?
How much clay do you want in that track? You use like maybe a piece of scrap to play with it to get.
Yeah, I mean, okay, we created the track originally in this example with a 1/4 inch straight bit. My tongue is not a 1/4 inch. It's at least, I would say, a shy 32nd less. Yeah, so we want to be in there loosely, but not, we don't want it to rattle too much. Yeah, this is not too bad. Good. Yeah.
Would rabbiting the backside be an option, or is there more compelling reasons to rabbit the front side?
My front, in this case, has a profile. There's a pattern going on, right? So if I rabbit the backside, instead of, are you talking about instead of rabbiting the front side? Then my profile goes into the track, correct? And I don't like the way that looks. That makes for a lot of gaps. And dirt, dust collecting in there. So this way I protect my track. I make it appear clean, I protect it from dust. So, and to do both doesn't really buy you anything. You might as well just only do the front. Yes?
And the tongue, is it longer than the depth of the track?
Yes.
Like your fisheye?
So he asked the rabbit, the rabbit I'm creating has a width, yeah. So let's call that the length of the tongue, yeah. And of course that has a relationship to the, no, Morty sees that down there, a relationship to the depth of my track. And we don't want the rabbit shoulder touch my panel, because that would over time scratch it up. So it actually, the weight, gravity, if we have a vertical scenario, I want the end of the tongue to rest and touch the bottom of my track. And how far the difference is actually your design choice. You can create a much more dramatic shadow line here by even going much more than I have. Yeah, mine is maybe a 1/16 of an inch, a shy 1/16 of an inch. I just wanted to not touch. That's all I wanted to guarantee. But you can actually be very deliberate about it. I don't know, how much did you do in yours?
I don't remember. Just got this.
Would that tongue shrink over time as you move it back and forth?
No, because it's in the direction of grain. We don't have wood movement in the length of grain direction.
I'm just thinking of wearing out.
Yeah, if you used a really soft wood maybe, but a hard wood, it's end grain, it's very tough. Yes?
So if that picture you have up there now, if you're making a roll top desk, it's 5 feet wide.
Yeah, that's right. Then I would probably route. Yeah. You got me.
Project. Wood guys and old drawers and things. I put in a little bit of wax on the wear surface. When it's all done, would you, like in the groove, do any kind of lubrication to help that?
Yeah, so we're jumping ahead a little bit. He's already talking about lubricating and all that. So we need to, this is something I caution my students at the college often when they fit drawers, and it's so tough. It's like, well, let's just get wax. And like, not yet. It's got to be moving on its own somewhat before we lubricate. Yeah. So again, the thickness of the tongue is that key element, and the problem is, not problem, but keep in mind, is my case at this point already glued up? Or do I still have the luxury of trying the track and the thickness of my tongue on one track only? Yeah, that would actually be preferable. Preferable? Preferable. Preferable. So, do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I just put my top by itself on my bench and I feed in my track and I can feel for the move. Because I want to get real good information. Is it the thickness of my tongue that's the problem? Is it maybe too thick? Or if I try both at the same time, could there be an alignment problem? Yeah, of the tracks. Yes?
So this comes back to the difference between the width of the track and the thickness of the tongue becomes critical then when you cut off that extra curve on your template, where you went through and did it twice and made it on the corner there. Because when it goes around the corner, your tongue becomes thicker, if you will, because it's resting on a curved surface.
Right. What can I use to draw here? So what we're up against is this problem. A rectangle being trapped in a curve. Yeah? So this we either make this thinner and then we fit in, or we make the track bigger and then we fit in, or we make it shorter and then we fit in. So we have different ways of addressing the same problem, but you got it. That's where the crux lies, that as the rectangular cross-section of each slat wants to come into the curve, it starts to bind. Yeah. Now some people have suggested, well, what if I create I leave the slat as wide as it is, but I create a tongue that is actually narrower? Could be done, but rather labor intensive. I'd rather not.
Putting the profile on each one of the slats, a bevel or something like that, that kind of helps too, I would assume.
But only if the profile continues in the tongue. Now my profile does not continue into the tongue. It only happens here on the outside. Yes, Tom?
On my end pieces, which are wider because you have to have room for the pull. That's what I did.
Yeah. I'll address, remind me when we come to the end. I'll address that. Yes?
What sort of a tolerance are you shooting for on the end? You know, where you put your tracks parallel to the case track? I'm assuming there's a minimum, maximum, you know, where it makes that bend.
To go into the garage?
Yes. What kind of spacing are you looking for between the timbre and the case side?
Are you, and now let's be more specific, canvas side, face side?
The face side of the, well, I'm talking about when you mill the track with your template and all that, and you have your
partition wall.
Yeah, you have your spacing of your shelf area. Yes. Now between, yeah, you have to have some gap there in the wood.
About 1/4 of an inch.
That's roughly what you're looking at shooting for.
Because it gets a little tighter as we make the curve, it gets smaller. But that should do it. And from this face, the inside of my case, to the outside of the timbre, 1/8 of an inch. That's all you need.
When it's open, though, you don't want to see the back of that canvas, so you're going to have that fairly tight up as well.
Where do you see canvas?
My point is you don't want to see the canvas on the back.
That means that this partition wall wants to come as far forward as possible. Okay, we got that. Little close-up action, featherboard. I'm cutting the thickness of my tongue. Yeah.
How do you push it through the saw when you've got this?
Very carefully.
Carefully. But yeah, trust him. It sounds bizarre, yeah, but you actually have more control than you think. And especially even if you wanted a what happened? Yeah. Even if you wanted a taller panel, you know, just think tall fence attachment. It gives you a lot of control. Yeah, and the featherboard is key, of course.
With a tall fence, you can get your hands away from the saw blade, but if you don't have a tall fence, then you can't get your hands very far away from the saw blade, it looks like.
Well, that's the featherboard's job. And you grab it sort of like this, and you put your hand where you feel comfortable. The featherboard's over here, and then you just push like that. Go all the way through. It's more stable than you think.
What happens is your heart rate goes up and your breathing stops when you start. and when you get through, you say, "Oh, that wasn't so bad."
We work as a team here. Yes.
I have featherboards that stack on each other, kind of make them higher.
Very cool.
And I've used it on the router table,
Yeah.
doing something on routing that way, so you're getting pressure up a little higher on your fence.
That's great.
Up in there.
That's good. But do you all know what I mean by a tall fence attachment? You know, just a little box out of plywood, make it yourself. Yes.
You don't get halfway through the cut and then pull it through, do you?
Never. How can I cannot do that. The featherboard won't let me. Featherboard is a one-directional pressure. I'm committed. I'm going through. And there's always that little element about that flappy piece of canvas. That's where I have to admit that's not really the most elegant solution, but I like that canvas. Now granted, it doesn't have to be quite so much. Yeah? And the reason why I hung on to that extra piece of canvas is that I can utilize it to attach the final cap piece. And this is something that we don't have here. Here I took the cheap way out. I just drilled a hole into my tambour slats and call that a pole. But I want to attach a cap piece, a final piece that is bigger than the slat, maybe because I need some surface to mount a pull, hardware, or in the past I've also embedded a mortise lock in one of those. So there's always the element of the final cap piece, and there are different ways how you can approach that, and I don't have a photo of it, but I can show you drawings that address this. And I want you to pay attention to here, this drawing addresses again basic elements that we talked about already in the case construction. This is out of a book, God, what was it called? Methods of Cabinet Making or something like that. But here, I want you to pay attention to this detail. These are the slats. This is the canvas behind it. This is the cap piece, and this gives you a couple of options how that cap piece can be attached. The first option is the cheap way out. We just glue it to the rear. This is a little more sophisticated, both of them. They actually utilize little screw-in sticks, pieces of wood, that get screwed in and beautifully hide and trap that remaining piece of canvas. So it doesn't look so unfinished the way I have it right now. Right now, I just trimmed this off with a razor blade, but it's not as durable. So you can actually have a nice cap piece here, and it's a bit complicated. But why bother with screws and all that? Why not glue it all in at once? Question is, how do I get this in here? The white piece will not make my turn. It needs to be, in a rather unpleasant procedure, screwed in when the panel has entered the cabinet, after the panel has entered the cabinet. You have to sort of screw in from behind that little cap piece. But it is actually a much more finished look and gives you options to, add things, handles, locks.
Christoph, how did you drill the holes through the canvas? Every time I've ever drilled through fabric, it just terrible.
I have height glue on one side. It actually really helped keep it together, yeah. I know what you mean. Try white masking tape, really. You can enter from both sides. I was lucky. Good backing. I think what I did is I pressed wood from behind. I clamped a piece of wood from behind as like zero tolerance backing, and then I drilled through and I had some residue of the height glue still there that kept it less fuzzy. Yeah.
So your end piece, it's installed after the panel is in. You slot it so it runs in that one, or you put a tongue on the end of it so it slides in the track.
Yes and no. You can do either way. Yeah. You can have maybe a tongue only on one side, because the question is, how do I get it in here? If it has tongues on both ends, I can't get it in. Otherwise, I would have to come in from behind, and then I could have attached it in the first place. Yeah. So it becomes a tricky beast. How can maybe one tongue and maybe a smaller tongue like that?
But once it's attached to the panel, it'll follow.
But the reality is that cap piece, once it's in, it will never have to turn a tight turn. Yeah. So I think I just have one tongue, and then it can go in like this, and then just appear the length of the visible part of this panel. So that's something that you can fine-tune and explore some more on your own, how you want to cap off the timbre. But that's the reason why I hung on to that last piece of canvas, because it can be useful for screwing on a final piece.
I've noticed when this is closed, it appears that there's some gaps in those leading slats. So
Here?
Yeah.
Because it's beginning to curve. It's actually this way. And I want to point out, look what I've done here. This is a concave curve. And so to some degree you can pull that off. Not just convex, but it can actually be a little bit, not like that. Convex we can go like this. But concave, a little bit. And I literally took my panel and I stretched it. Yeah? I stretched the canvas to give me the flex. And this could be a little better. This is a little rough, how this feels. Yeah. So this piece is already a few years old. Might have some dirt in the tracks. But that is something that you need to play with. You put it in, you try, then you take it all the way out, and you go, okay, now what can I do? I can maybe take a sanding block, and I reduce the size of my rabbit. I mean, the tongue. I can reduce the thickness of my tongue. Make it a little thin. I wouldn't quite go as far as going back to the table saw, but when it's the difference between this and this is looser. That's maybe a question of sanding the tongue a little thinner. Or I begin using lubrication. Yeah. So key is another gentleman asked me earlier, no finish in the track. So I like to do that. Any kind of finish tends to kind of increase friction than decrease friction. So the only thing I put in there is wax. Yeah, that's not so pretty. A stain, a dye, an alcohol-based dye should be fine. If you're careful, you don't want to get it on the outside here, on your exposed wood. If you work in solid wood, that's obviously not an option. But do not put any oils in there or polyurethane. It all gets kind of sticky, yeah, because it doesn't dry out. It's filled. It's filled with wood in the closed position, so it doesn't off-gas easily. So no finish, maybe some wax. Tom came up with a clever trick when he finished his panel material of his casework, and he had the tracks, of course, routed and all. But then did you pre-finish before glue up? I forgot. Yes. So before the assembly, the final glue up assembly, he actually applied finishes on everything, and he found this material that was a flexible, kind of a soft, foamy-like ribbon, and he just pressed it into the track. It beautifully adapted to all the curves, and he could finish to his delight, and not having ever to worry that anything would drip into the track.
Or the backings for screening.
Yeah.
No.
That's basically, I think, the last photo.
What was that material, Tom?
It was polyurethane, flexible polyurethane weather stripping. Comes in Home Depot, two sizes.
Yeah, it was helpful, right? I mean, you don't have to be so paranoid about getting any finishes in there.
It's a real pain to try to stuff masking tape in a slot.
Yeah, no, you can't do that. Yes?
Could you use two brass dowels or else wooden dowels on your end piece so that it would go around the corner?
Sure.
Say that.
Unless it's so wide that it doesn't make the turn into the garage and conflicts with the casework, your false vertical sides and things like that. So you want to figure that out in a full-scale drawing, detailed drawing, that you can make that turn. Yeah. Well, that's basically it, how you can create a tambour panel and incorporate it into the design. Key is that you remember in the case design, you want to be proactive. So you can't just say, oh, I'm building a nice little cabinet, and no, I'm not going to have a door, I'm going to put a tambour in it. That's kind of too late. You have to plan ahead in your entire case design already has to anticipate receiving a tambour panel to make it have that look where it disappears, where you don't see it. That's part of me. For me, that's part of the beauty of using this. And,
if you turn that around, you'll see the back of the door.
That's right. And you see the entry track here, that shallow curve coming in. You see the garage right here. You asked about the clearances in the garage. You can get a sense here, 1/4 inch on the inside. Because of the turn, maybe just 1/8 of an inch on the outside. That's all you really need. Yes, please.
In your planning, how do you do your drawings? Do you sketch up? Do you sit down and draw it all out, or?
I'm a dinosaur. I love my pencil and my paper and draw it all out, yeah. SketchUp is a fantastic tool. It's great. I don't recommend SketchUp for designing. I think it's not as free as your hand and the pencil when you do your sketching, when you come up with a concept of a piece. I think SketchUp is fantastic to create work drawings. And
do you do full-scale drawings?
that depends on the nature of the project. For something like that, well, I mean, that fits on a piece of paper, so I can do a full-scale drawing. It really depends on the complexity. I often can get away with a 1:8 scale drawing, and with just a few detail scenarios of joinery, post and rail, something like that. Other pieces that incorporate sweeping arcs and curves, I sometimes do a full-size footprint on a piece of plywood and take measurements from that because I can't calculate because of the curvature of certain things. Then where I always do a full-size drawing is a front and side view of a chair. That's because of all the angles involved. When you...
In a finished piece where you put a cover on the back.
A back panel?
Yeah. Will you put one on the back?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a nightstand up against the wall, so that is my back panel right here.
Well, my concern would be the piece would get pushed near a wall outlet with a plug, and you'll open the door and there scratches the front of your timber, and you don't know that there's an obstacle there.
Did you all understand the question? If there's something here that maybe a plug, an outlet, that could damage my panel, maybe it would be safer to have yet another back panel. Sure, you can do that, which basically makes your piece wider. You need to add depth to your case to accommodate yet another panel here.
Whereas it's like in our home, we've got a clock radio, there's a blanket control, there's this, there's that. If something slips off, falls back there, you may not know it. And you gotta open it.
But you're right, because our show site is exposed in the open position. It's exposed to the bad wall, yeah, and what could be there. You're right. So if that is a concern in that living space, I would certainly do something to protect this. And what are we talking? I need 3/8 of an inch to provide another back panel. Yes?
Can we talk about finishing the Tambours yet, as far as is there any?
Good question. So, by the way, this is how it exits. So yeah, this is not what you really want to run over the table saw, but it doesn't feel that way when it comes out of the press. It is a stiff thing. You can saw it. You can do things with it. So here you see the material removed on the backside. And you actually have to actively snap each stick to make it this loose, because there's just a little bit of glue in that canvas, and break that apart. You do that after you're done with your fitting, with your rabbet cutting. And now in this position, this is oiled. A little bit of finish, a little bit of finish, a little bit of finish, a little bit of finish. Do not just finish like that and think that's good enough, because things will seep in, and the moment you open it up, you see unsightly drops and running finish in these cracks. So you actually need to go ahead. That was fun, right, when you did that? Wipe it all clean, wipe it all clean. It's kind of a little meditative work to do Tambours. Very, very repetitive.
Especially when you did the ones with different colors. They showed red, yellow, blue.
Yeah, they were finished separately, that's true. And then how do I let it dry? You can't let it dry like this. You make a coil, and now every seam is slightly splayed apart, enough to air dry the finish. Yes, the side, you're talking about the inside faces, right? Those will never be addressed again after the canvas has been glued on. So you might as well, you can actually pre-finish all the side edges before you even assemble in the canvas. Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, Yeah, I mean, we always have to make a decision. Is pre-finishing more practical, or does it cause more trouble? We always have pros and cons depending on our scenario. Yeah.
I noticed that the frame itself, everything was dowels, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then when you did your final glue up, you just clamped both sides, each side? Yeah.
Well, first I glued side to bottom to shelf to side.
Okay.
Oh, no. Bottom and shelf are in the same direction in their joinery, and I glued the sides onto that, and then I glued the top in the vertical direction to that previous glue up. After that's dry, I don't do it all at once. Always glue up in phases.
That's where I've run into problems when I don't put the clamps on right sometimes. You know, I'll get a bow and
Yeah.
like for that I would put a spacer in the middle.
Here? Yeah. Well, you know, there are different I always break it down in steps. I don't want to do too much at once. Just focus on one glue up at a time, and it's not, you don't have to glue it up all at once. You can break it down into steps.
Well, the backs and the garage wall, right, slots.
Tongue and groove joints, yeah.
So they have to be put together with, because you can't put them in.
That's right. Yeah, you have to always consider the order of how things get assembled, so you find out it's not too late. Yeah, that you can't. If I had put this top out too early, I could not put this piece in. Yeah.
You always dry fit everything together and.
Sure. Take a class with us. You'll learn all those procedures.
So when you're making a rope like this, that panel is, you're looking at probably closer to half-inch thick.
Yeah. Right.
So that's a lot of weight.
Uh-huh.
So when you got that panel it's open in the open position there, when you go to pull that down to close it, you're putting a lot of stress on that canvas right there.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to, you go with a heavier duty canvas, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you do there to try to extend the life of that?
No. Nothing I can think of right now, but I mean, that piece was over 100 years old, so it lasted for a while. But here's the fun part. You can actually work with little gravitational aids when you do a vertical tambour panel. Yeah, you can actually have weights. You can get involved in some engineering with pulleys and things where it actually feels much lighter to open it all the way up from the bottom because some weight pulls it down on the opposite
What's
side.
easier or what's more difficult about horizontal or vertical timbers?
He asked, is it more difficult to do a horizontal panel versus a vertical panel? That I wouldn't answer like that, but what I would say is it is always easier, just like it is with drawers, to fit a panel that is longer than wide. Yeah? If you have a panel that is this tall and only this wide, and the sticks go vertically, you're going to run into trouble. Just like you are when you have a drawer that is very wide and not very deep. A lot of racking can occur. So you run into a similar challenge here. Long and skinny is easier to fit, makes it flow easier. Yes, please.
With the jewelry box size, do you go to a lighter weight canvas and smaller?
No, I actually used the mid-grade canvas, mid-weight canvas, but my sticks were maybe 5/16 by 5/16. I mean, they get a little more delicate looking. I mean, that is a design choice for proper proportion. Yes?
On the canvas, do you use cotton or linen?
Canvas, what's the material?
Linen, yeah. Linen canvas. Yeah, we have a art supply store in town. And, I mean, I bought this at Artisan in Santa Fe, and they have those kinds of linen canvases for you. Yeah. And before I finish, just a little pitch for our school. So for those of you who don't know, I teach at the community college in Santa Fe. We have a very extensive fine woodworking program there. Classes run through regular semester duration, which is 16 weeks. Spring semester, fall semester. We also have a summer term, just like any other college, where we structure the classes differently. During the regular semesters, you come to class once or twice a week for the duration of the semester. In the summertime, you actually take block courses, which are 1 full week, 5 days a week, all day. It's like having a job. So feel free to spend your summer vacation with us. But of course, we have a lot of information on the website, Santa Fe Community College. And anything from total beginners to very advanced classes. And we have a number of students from Albuquerque who come up every week. And feel free to get some information.